with all the kind of the tariffs moving around, and how do you handle it on a day-to-day basis?
We're trying hard to figure this all out. We are seeing reshoring. People. We got a big job in which people want to buy from the United States, have a stamper make it in the United States. Even if all this works, and they negotiate great treaties this week and months ahead, we need a workforce.
Welcome to the CBIA BizCast powered by Google. The episode you're about to watch on the uncertainty of tariffs was recorded on May 5th. We hope you find this episode helpful. I'm Chris DiPentima, the president and CEO of CBIA. And joining us today is Chris Ulbrich, chair of Ulbrich Steel and Special Metals, who last year celebrated their 100th year anniversary. Congratulations on that,
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And so you're here today not only as the chair of Ulbrich Steel and Special Metals, but also as Connecticut's resident tariff expert.
I don't know about that, but
well, we've all reached out to you to get your comments and opinions about what's going on in the world. 47 years at Ulbrich. You guys import, I believe, 70% of your steels from outside the U.S. here, and big supplier to the stamping industry here in our great state of Connecticut. And so you're someone who knows the industry, who knows the global supply chain and the impact tariffs either could have, or you're probably one of the ones who are starting to feel it sooner than later. So we thought we'd spend today's conversation really understanding your perspective of what the impact may be on Connecticut, and get some insight for our business leaders out there.
Great, Chris. Looking forward to share.
Yeah. Yep. So tell us, we've been asked a lot by businesses, what's it mean to me? So far, what has been the impact on Ulbrich Steel for the tariffs?
Well, first of all, I believe we import, it's probably 70-30, 70 U.S., 30 imports.
Okay. The opposite of what
it's a whole range of things going on since, don't forget, we've been under the 232 tariffs since, 6 years, President Trump's first term. And when they came out at 25%, there weren't really exemptions. Then they started doing all these exemptions. And so basically you could get different imports with no tariffs. Now, President Trump's second term, he's throwing eventually all that away, supposedly. No exemptions, no duty drawbacks. This is now pushed out to July. So that's the big one for us, because we do have imports at 25%, and we have exemptions on it. So you got that going on.
And Chris, just so our listeners understand, the 232 tariff, is that the U.S., Mexico-Canada agreement, or is that a global?
No, that was
tariff?
the global one in which protecting the United States for national defense when he first put those tariffs in 5-6 years ago. So we got that overhang on us. What's really going to happen is are we really going to get another 25%? Because right now it's 10% in the world. So, but we are seeing reshoring. People. We got a big job in which people want to buy from the United States, have a stamper make it in the United States, and so there are jobs like that coming back. We see that. So there's a positive. And there's a whole bunch of activity going on in Mexico right now. People are saying, well, okay, maybe we won't bring it back to the United States, but we'll bring it back to Mexico from China. Lots of activity going on with that. And then of course the 10% coming in, and we plan on passing the tariffs on, and of course there's a delay in that. You got to make the product, you got to collect the money from the customer. It could be 3, 4, 5 months, and so so we're a couple $1 million behind right now. I can't imagine, some people must be multi-millions behind. Trying to put the stuff on the shelf and get paid and pay the tariff, et cetera. So, and then of course, what happens when the tariffs come to an end, whatever it is, right? And then you have a full inventory, and the customers are saying, this is great, tariffs are over. Not so fast. We got a lot of inventory still and a lot of parts or whatever. So it's all over the place.
And that's what we're hearing from businesses, is that it's all over the place relative to uncertainty. And as you know, leading a business yourself, businesses and I think residents really want predictability, stability, certainty, right? How do I go about planning my businesses? And today, you kind of mentioned just a level set. We've got the 10% tariff across the board. We've got the additional tariffs on China, which is as high as 145, 150%. And then, as you said, there was the drive to move a lot of work under Trump 1.0, the 2018 United States, Canada, Mexico agreement that moved a lot of work from China to Mexico and or China to Canada. And so we end up with this kind of North American corridor. In Connecticut, we saw about $1 billion of imports move from China to primarily Mexico. And that may now have a 25% tariff if it's not exempted under the USMCA. So with all the kind of the tariffs moving around, and now we've paused them for 90 days,
Right.
Automotive's excluded, smartphones, electronics may be excluded. Businesses are really trying to navigate through it before we kind of get through the cycle of the supply chain and how the pricing may flow through. How do you handle it on a day-to-day basis, knowing where the cost increase is coming from or not? Is it just passed along to you?
Yeah, we're trying hard to figure this all out. Like we had some metal that shipped from China. Basically, it's $100 a pound. By the time it hit, it's really $300 a pound, 190% tariff. The only company in the United States that makes that product sells it for $400 a pound. And so the 7 customers that we have for this product, they got to make a decision. Do they want us to buy it from China at $300 or resource us domestically at $400?
Yeah, at a slightly higher cost.
Then the trick is the domestic producers. Are they going to tailor what they need? Will we start seeing them increasing their prices? And the example there, maybe that one American producer will go up to $500 or $600 a pound because they feel that they're the only game in the town. So there's all these unknowns going on. I guess the biggest problem for us, we ship to China from Connecticut here, and all our orders are basically on hold because the Chinese customers do not want to pay 143% tariff on our product. Now, $40 billion 2 days ago were exempt by the Chinese government. I'm not sure if that's some of our stuff. So we got to figure that out. So
and that figuring out, that must take a lot of effort on your end. You're looking at contracts, you're looking at what the administration has pushed out. You're probably not alone in that. And is that something that you have to do on your own, or you guys have to grab professional resources? How do you work through where the tariffs apply, where they don't apply? Yeah,
we have we belong to a group of the Precision Metal Association, PMA, and they've helped tremendously on they have weekly calls, and we're trying to figure it out one day at a time here.
Navigating those, through those uncertainties.
Yeah, but our business being on hold, and then that means that these inventories are on hold. So, and it's driving up costs. Now, hopefully, we'll get more of these American jobs, resourced and things like that. And the 232 is the trick, though. What's going to happen with that, with the exemptions? I would hope that the reason we filed for exemptions is because some of the stuff's not made in America, or these alloys aren't made. So I would hope that they would leave them in place after July. But you don't build $1 billion steel mill here overnight. And what's the next administration? What's the next challenges in Washington? $1 billion mill is going to face to build a steel mill is like $1 billion for some of these product forms.
And a long process time. It's interesting that you talk about the export side. I think we've all been hyper-focused on the cost impact to us in the U.S. on the importing side with the tariffs that the administration has rolled out. There's been reciprocal tariffs rolled out potentially and or paused by the countries also that we do business with. And you mentioned that your work with China is paused. We heard from a member company up in Pomfret, Connecticut, who does wood flooring. And their 2 biggest markets are China for their high-end wood flooring and Canada for their lower-end wood flooring that they make. They have a sawmill up there, fairly complex organization, although about 35 employees. Their business in both countries has been paused, quote unquote, because of the understanding of the reciprocal impact of exporting. And as a result, they've had to pause their business here in Connecticut and essentially temporarily lay off everybody because they just have no business.
Yeah.
You're seeing a similar thing. Obviously, you're a larger company, could potentially handle with a pause in China because you have other markets, but you're literally seeing businesses pause that you export to.
Yes, without a doubt. And then a lot of the different executives I've met, they have machines coming in, or they want to place new orders for new machines to expand their products and stuff. Well, they're coming in from Europe, and if there's a tariff on it, it's a $180,000 machine, and they're looking at a major increase in the cost because of the tariff. So you got that going on too. Now, maybe that's next on the agenda, is to get some of that stuff exempt.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you raised that, because you've got the raw material, the purchase components, import costs. But as you know, Connecticut manufacturers are very innovative, rely on our workforce, rely on the latest technologies. And so we bring in a lot of equipment to support our manufacturing sector in the state, because we don't compete on low-cost wages. We compete on doing things faster, better than the rest of the world. And so that reliance on innovative equipment, not all of it's coming from America. You're going to have those additional costs on top of your raw materials that may be going up as well. And so it's interesting that you're raising that alarm earlier, because that may cause businesses to stall on that type of investment.
And then some of the supplies that a steel mill uses, they have a mechanism called surcharge mechanism. There's a base price, and there's a surcharge. Well, it's a catch-all. So if this goes on for a while, that surcharge is going to go up and up and up. And it's cathodes, it's some of the raw materials, some of the scrap, paper, interleave, something. So, some of that stuff comes from overseas with a tariff now, and so that could cause the tariffs to go up and costs to go up too.
The costs to go up.
The surcharge to go up and additional costs. So
let's talk about kind of how the supply chain works. Then, a lot of businesses we're talking to, they're like, I'm not feeling anything yet. I know something's coming. Help me, with that uncertainty of figuring out where it may come from. Walk us through how the supply chain works, at least in your environment. You're bringing in raw materials potentially from either the U.S. or overseas. You guys are processing it. There's this delay. You then pass it on to the customer, and like you said, that's when the billing starts, and maybe that supply chain will see those cost increases. Talk us through that cycle. How long is that cycle, and how complex is it?
So if we buy something from Pittsburgh and roll it in Connecticut, it could take 6 to 8 weeks to get the product. And it might take 6 weeks to get it out of our factory in Connecticut to the customer. Then they make locks, stampings, fire sprinkler heads, airplane parts, landing gear parts, etc. So the customer makes it. They ship it to their customer. It could be GE or Honeywell or somebody, and then the process starts over. Now, so some of the stuff we buy from overseas, it's not made here, right. And so now, could it be made here? It's possible, but some of the product forms that we have, it's not, that capacity is not here anymore. Like stainless steel rod, 90% is imported. There's only 2 producers here. And that was under the first 25% with 25% tariff under Trump, the national defense one. It's not made here. I mean, seriously, if it's not made, only 10% is made here. It's that really drove up the costs. So
it may be 12 to 16 weeks before a Connecticut manufacturer in the supply chain who buys from you sees that increase. You may quote it when they first quote you for the material, but they won't feel that actual dollar impact. And potentially, if it's 6 weeks there, 6 weeks with you, or 8 weeks, 12 to 16 weeks, and then they'll feel that cost impact.
Yeah. I would say, and it's just beginning. Like I said, we're a couple $1 million behind. Just beginning the process right now.
And when you say a couple $1 million behind, you've eaten a couple $1 million in cost increases and haven't moved them down the supply chain.
Right.
Yeah, that's significant. And then, as you said, it goes to the supplier. Let's say I'm a stamping house. Okay, I've just got a 25% increase from Ulbrich and any other supplier out there. You're not unique in that situation. And now I've got to pass it on to my customer, who may be Pratt & Whitney, and it takes me 16 to 24 weeks to make my stamped product. And so then Pratt & Whitney doesn't feel it for another 24 weeks after that. And then they pass it on to Airbus or Boeing. And there's obviously this accumulation. So we could be 6 months, 9 months into the process before the consumer starts to feel that price increase.
Now, some of the product forms of nickel alloys are easier. They're more sourced domestically here, as you know. I'm talking about some of the stainlesses and things like that, the commodity grades and things like that. But nickel alloys, Pratt & Whitney, some of the larger companies, they might not be affected for a while, depending on where.
They're not as reliant on stainless. So what industries would be more reliant on stainless that you service?
No, that's springs and stamping people in Waterbury Valley, and without a doubt.
There's just been this kind of commentary about, well, this is short-term pain for long-term gain, right? We're going to have these pains of cost increases that will trickle through the supply chain, or maybe not trickle, but abruptly hit the supply chain and move its way through, and eventually onto us all as consumers, depending on what we're buying that's made with stainless or any other product that's imported. But there will be this long-term gain, and that will bring a lot more product back to the United States. Like you said early on, we haven't made it in a long time. One of the contras to that has been, well, we don't have the workforce and or the capacity capability, right? We have right now in Connecticut 82,000 job openings, about 7,000 job openings in manufacturing with our current demand. Now, if we had this opportunity to bring more demand in domestically because of this reshoring, where are we going to get these workers from? What issues do you see with this long-term gain of potentially reshoring before we get to the positives of of reshoring?
Even if all this works, and they negotiate great treaties this week and the months ahead, and July goes away and more reasonable tariffs are put in, we need a workforce. And we've been through this many times. And, we have more workers here now than Japan, Russia, China. So we got a leg up on the rest of the world with our workforce. Now we got to make people, the right documentation, and do it. Because if everything comes back, the people are just going to switch jobs for more money, and we're going to be right in a mess again.
Yeah, we'll still have that competitiveness on labor, and then it's just wages and benefits, but not filling it with more people. And more capacity.
And AI will get us a little bit, help us be more efficient and lean and all that, but we're still shy, I think, on workers. And I mean, we've been 100,000 short in Connecticut. It's improved a little bit, but it's still going on. And so they got to address this, just like the tariffs. Where are the people coming from?
Holistically, What's the overall strategy? They're talking about a tax package as well as a complement to tariffs to bring costs down. But as you said, if you're bringing it in at $300 overseas and the U.S. current price is $400, it's still a $100 differential. How do you get it to be an even playing field? And regardless, there's a price increase that goes on to the consumer.
Yeah. So, but all the lots of companies are already bringing stuff back. I forget what the numbers were, but it's $1 trillion. $1 trillion to spend on new factories and things like that. Like you said, where are the people going to come from? In Texas, Florida, some of these factories for semiconductors and things like that.
Yeah, we're starting to see that growth. We've seen growth in manufacturing post-pandemic and the job numbers, but United States, 7.5 million job openings, about 450,000 in manufacturing alone. There's still this gap, to your point, that we need to fill with a holistic strategy around workforce growth, population growth. If we're going to do this reshoring. What about the arguments for the long-term gain, that if we are able to develop the capacity, we are able to kind of offset the cost a little bit, that we'll have this growth domestically? Do you see that as an opportunity for Ulbrich, where you guys have facilities outside of the United States as well? Or do you see an environment where if these tariffs are a border, if you're doing business internationally, it's probably going to come from some of your international locations rather than the Connecticut location?
Yeah, I see some benefits. At the same time, we lost 7 million jobs to Asia, and they still pollute, they still counterfeit, they still use break labor laws, et cetera. So, and this is what we compete against, and so hopefully some of these reshoring and things will make a difference.
There's not a lot that we talk about being able to do locally relative to the tariffs. Obviously, this is not only national policy, but a global interaction as well. And the supply chain is so global. But if in your shoes, is there recommendations that you have to Connecticut lawmakers who, again, they can't really do anything about national policy or global policy, but what recommendations would you give them to help the businesses that are potentially going to be impacted by the tariffs? The state recently rolled out a $25 million program to help Connecticut businesses who have either international supply chain or international locations, reshore them, bring them to Connecticut specifically. Are there programs and or policies that you recommend lawmakers consider in light of what's going on globally with the tariffs and what you're aware of?
Well, you and I've talked about some of this, but business is a big puzzle. There's 200 pieces of our business, right? All these pieces, and then when there's a few pieces missing, it's not a pretty picture. You don't like that puzzle. And Connecticut can help on workers' comp, on getting more competition for the hospitals. On some of the sites that are polluted to with deep, to try to get those places back on the tax rolls. Help businesses out, just like how they help labor out. Help the businesses out, the small business, medium business, and let's do it as a partnership.
Yeah, lower cost of doing business would obviously help us be more competitive on a global environment here in Connecticut, especially having a very productive workforce, and lower cost of living would help us keep more of our residents and actually attract more people to the state. Going back to your earlier point about having the ability to have the workforce to handle additional capacity, but also future capacity down the road.
Yeah, I've heard Governor Lamont say 76,000 people. If we can find jobs for those people, that's 76,000 people paying taxes. And it's wonderful. Working families. Make it easier for some of this to happen. We have all kinds of workforce development things going on, and training and stuff in the chambers and you folks, and they should be helping out quite a bit.
Yeah, it's easy to get distracted by what's going on at a national, global level, and lose track of what you can do at a state level.
Right.
And that's what we're currently encouraging lawmakers to do, as we have a few weeks to go in the session, is do everything you can to help Connecticut residents and businesses, and specifically that's lower the cost of doing business. As you mentioned earlier, PMA being a resource for you, are there resources out there that you would recommend to the Connecticut manufacturing community outside of the associations, the CBIAs, the PMAs, and others that you see on a regular basis that kind of giving you some intelligence of what's going on with the tariffs and the global economy overall?
Well, yourselves, of course, CBIA and PMA and the aerospace organization.
Aerospace components manufacturers, the ACM you guys are a member of.
And I think they're the chambers. The chambers help out quite a bit.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, the local chambers are a big part of it. Are there economic sources that you're turning to on a regular basis outside of the associations, either newspapers or magazine subscriptions? I know we don't have that; everything's now electronic. But where you're getting your forecasting from, or you're looking at what's happening, what the tariff impact is happening on certain industries.
Yeah, we're a big believer in ITR. They're a New Hampshire-based forecasters, and buy their newsletters every month, every quarter, and they've been pretty accurate over the years, and they're very aggressive on what's happening now with tariffs and what their predictions are, and they claim very high marks, but I'm pretty accurate. We use that quite a bit. I went to one of the seminars once, and sitting next to me, talking to this person, was from Boeing. To the right of me was from Caterpillar Tractor. And I go, oh yeah, we've been using them for 20 years. I go, I think we got to hop on board here. Pretty good recommendations.
All right, that would be a great resource for our listeners as well too. We like to try to end every BizCast with kind of a lesson for folks out there. Put yourself in the shoes of that medium small business that you supply so many of Connecticut. We have such a close network of friends here in the state. Amidst this uncertainty that we've talked about, what would be your advice for them as leaders, not just to handle the tariff situation, but how do they run their businesses? Would you recommend in this time of uncertainty?
Well, meet with your team maybe every morning or 3 days a week, and then communicate with everybody. Let everybody know. They see on the plant floor, maybe the jobs are half what they used to be. And, what's going on? Communicate. Full communication, I think helps so much.
Really appreciate your insight on this. You are the resident tariff expert in Connecticut, and we'll stay in touch as things unfold, and good luck with yourself and your team
Thank you.
Navigating through it.
Good being here. Thanks for all you do for the state and in your clientele. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's BizCast. You can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review and let us know if you have any ideas for a future podcast. For more episodes, head over to CBIA.com.